Good evening and welcome to the sixth installment of the Adult Task Force webinar series. My name is Amethyst Johnson Creekay and I am the Manager of Information and Referral Services here at the Tourette Association of America. For those of you that are tuning in for the first time, here is a snapshot of the work that we do at the TAA. We are committed to bettering the lives of individuals affected by Tourette Syndrome and Tic Disorders. Our organization works to raise awareness, advance research, and to provide ongoing support through our centers of excellence, chapters, and support groups nationwide. Today, we will be addressing the topic of advocacy. Self-advocacy is an important way for a person with Tourette syndrome to increase awareness about their diagnosis, while also bettering the lives of others affected by Tourette syndrome and tic disorders. Here to expand upon this topic is our VP of Public Policy, Diana Fellner, and rising leader, Olivia Woodridge. Diana has 20 years of experience in government and regulatory affairs. Prior to joining the TAA, she served as Director of Government Affairs at Bunge North America, Inc., and Head of Federal Government Relations in Syngenta. Olivia was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome at the age of 7. She is the 2016 Youth Ambassador and 2019 Rising Leader at the Tourette Association. As such, she has traveled across the country giving anti-bullying and inclusion presentations on Tourette syndrome to thousands of students, teachers, and school administrators. Olivia is currently a junior at Oral Roberts University in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where she is a political science pre-law major. She also competes in the Miss America pageant system and has held 2 titles. Okay, and we're going to start with Diana.
Thank you, Amethyst. And hi, everyone. So glad you could join us tonight. I hope you're staying warm and I hope you're staying safe. It is definitely a cold one out there for some of us, but for those of us who are on here, we can all be grateful that we have power. So that is a phenomenal thing. All right, with that, I want to talk to you a little bit today about advocacy and also a little bit about learning your rights. They kind of go hand in hand to some degree, so I thought that would be great to go over those. So what is advocacy? Well, if you take out the dictionary, yes, I'm old school, I take out a dictionary, but you could also Google it online, I guess. But if you take one out and you look it up, what the definition of advocacy is the act or process of supporting a cause or a proposal. It's the act or process of advocating for something. So that's an interesting definition, but there's types of advocacy too. There's not just one kind. And those types are self-advocacy, individual advocacy, and systems advocacy. And we're going to go through those. Next slide. Perfect. So self-advocacy, that refers to an individual's ability to effectively communicate, convey, negotiate, or assert his or her own interests, desires, needs, and rights. What it also means is self-advocacy means understanding your strengths, your needs, identifying your personal goals, and knowing your legal rights and representation and communicating them to others in a way that is beneficial to you. Bottom line, self-advocacy, it's speaking up for yourself. Next slide. So where can self-advocacy be a useful tool? It can be a useful tool at school, and that can be both graduate and undergraduate level. It can be a tool at work, any organizations that you participate in, public interactions, and social engagements. But also self-advocacy can be used to educate, to help others better understand Tourette syndrome and tic disorders. And why? Because awareness brings understanding. All right, so our next type of advocacy, individual advocacy. So individual advocacy is when a person or a group of people concentrate their efforts on just one or two individuals. And according to the group Advocacy for Inclusion, advocacy is having someone to stand beside you if you think something is unfair or that someone is treating you badly and you would like to do something to change it. You can kind of think of individual advocacy in a way of a wingman to some degree. So there's 2 forms of individual advocacy, informal and formal. So the informal form of advocacy is when people like parents, friends, family members, or even agencies speak out and advocate for vulnerable people. And then there's formal advocacy. More frequently, that involves organizations that pay their staff to advocate for someone or for a group of individuals. An important group to know about is NDRN, which is a National Disabilities Rights Network. That is a non-for-profit membership organization for the federally mandated protection and advocacy systems and client assistant programs. There is a P&A or a CAP agency in every state and U.S. territory, as well as one serving the Native American population in the Four Corners region. What's great is that this network is the largest provider of legally based advocacy services to people with disabilities in the United States. All right, next slide. So on to systems advocacy. That's something I know a fair bit about as a lobbyist. So systems advocacy is about changing policies, laws, or rules that impact how someone or a group lives their lives. This type of advocacy can be targeted in many ways. It can be targeted at a local, state, or a national agency. You can focus on changing laws or simply written or unwritten policy. What is targeted depends on what the type of problem is and who has the authority or ability to solve the problem. TAA's National Advocacy Day, which by the way is March 3rd. If you haven't signed up, Google it online. You can still sign up and join us. It is a great way to engage in advocacy for the Tourette Syndrome and Tic Disorders community as a whole. You can advocate for key policies federally and state and district offices of your representative and senators. And what we are looking for as well is outreach coordinators who can engage with state chapters and support groups to help increase advocacy with the state and district offices. And this is the point where I'd actually like to ask Olivia, who has participated in many, many advocacy days, at least 4 that I know of, because that's how long I've been around. But Olivia, I would love for you to say a few words about Advocacy Day and what it has meant to you these years.
Yes, well, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Yes, so like Diana just said, I've actually been to Advocacy Day. This would be my 5th year. So my first year, I was trained in 2016, and that just completely changed my life. Prior to that, I had never met anyone else who has Tourette syndrome. So I always, felt alone, and I didn't really know much about the disorder for myself. So after I was trained, we went up to Capitol Hill, and once you step foot in that building, let me tell you, there is nothing like it. Personally, National Advocacy Day has given me a sense of purpose, because prior to this, I never really knew what I wanted to do with my life. And after my 3rd year going to the Capitol, I even changed my major from musical theater to political science, because I now want to be a lobbyist. So all in all, National Advocacy Day is super life-changing. It is an incredible experience, and you should all sign up to come to National Advocacy Day.
Thank you, Olivia. And I think the one amazing benefit of National Advocacy Day this year is that it is virtual. So we don't get that impressive part of walking on the marble floors and walking the halls of Congress, although everyone's feet will be much happier this time. Everyone can participate from home, which is fantastic. So that's a great opportunity that won't be there next year, because next year, hopefully, it seems the Capitol will be reopened and we'll be going in person. All right, so let me cover some advocacy communication tips. So no matter what form of advocacy you're doing, whether it's self-advocacy with your employer, self-advocacy with your member of Congress, self-advocacy, just teaching someone that you've encountered who had a lack of understanding. You know, there's some great communication tips to utilize through all these different techniques. And number one, the most important thing to always do first is to do your research. So an impromptu conversation with someone who doesn't understand is one thing, but when you have time beforehand, before a presentation or a meeting, do the research, know your facts, and importantly, know your audience and what is going to be compelling to them. And then utilize that as you draft your talking points in advance, so you know that you're going to reach that audience in a way that they can appreciate and understand, and you get your facts and points across. Second point, keep it personal. Personal forms of communication can get lost in today's world of texting and social media. But remembering that these personal forms, which include letters, it does include emails, faxes, although I'm not sure how many people still have fax machines, telephones, or in-person office visits. By doing that, it indicates a greater amount of effort, which also shows a greater amount of effort and interest. And the more effort that you put in, the more seriously you're going to be heard and listened to. Keep it concise. So the world is busy and people only have so much of an attention span and time to give to others in their schedule. So it is important to have your communication be concise. The more concise it is, the more likely that it will receive attention, and the more likely that they will understand and retain the message that you're trying to get across. Of course, keep it polite. You know, passion is important. And even if you have a differing viewpoint from someone, that is okay to get those points across. But you should always keep your tone and points positive. I'm not sure if y'all have heard this phrase, but it's certainly one I've grown up with, which is you attract more flies with honey. And some say you attract more flies with honey than with vinegar. It's a good approach to have in advocacy. A nice smile, a polite conversation can go a long way to helping you achieve your goals. And last, explain why. You want them to feel why this is important, to understand why whatever it is that you're advocating for is important. Because at the end of the day, teachers want their students to do better. Congressmen and senators want to represent their constituents because they want to get reelected. Employers want a more productive workforce. And the list goes on and on. You just have to explain to them as you're doing research, what's in it for them and why should they care. Next slide. All right, so how are ways you can get more engaged in advocacy? And on this slide, I'm being a little selfish. I'm talking about Tourette specifically, of course, but that's why we're all here, right? So first, as we mentioned, TA's National Advocacy Day. It's once a year. It's coming up on March 3rd. It's a great way to advocate directly with your senators and your representatives. The great news is we set up all the meetings for you. You just have to register, which is fantastic. But I do want to underscore the importance that you are, as Olivia said, you're there representing yourself, but you're also there representing the approximate other 900,999 people, 999.99. You know, there's a lot of people out there, and you're not just speaking for you, you're speaking for everyone like you as well. And to get those points across of what is needed for the Tourette syndrome and tic disorder community. What else can you do? Take action letters. You'll see those on our website. We have a specific there. If you go in our public policy section, take action letters. It sends letters to your members of Congress and your senators, asking them to support key public policy priorities that are important to our community. In addition, you can also do emails, faxes, telephone calls, or you can even go visit them back when they're home in the state and district where you are, their office is there. This indicates a greater amount of effort and interest. Also, take action emails from chapters and support groups. If you all are linked to your local chapters and support groups, then I will be sending emails throughout the year, but especially coming up in the March, April, May timeframe, to chapter leaders asking and support group leaders asking them to send emails out to the folks in their groups, to send emails specifically to specific staff, asking them to support the funding for the CDC Tourette Syndrome program or other policy aspects throughout the year as they become important and pertinent. So keep an eye out for those. It doesn't take long. It's a cut and paste text, add your personal story. The email's there for you to click on, and it makes it very easy, but it goes a long way to help you and the almost 1 million other people with Tourette syndrome or tic disorder. Down below, get involved locally. You know, we're trying to build an advocacy network for each state to have an advocacy coordinator to work in each chapter or support group, or even if there's not somebody there, a chapter or a support group in your state, we'd love to build them. So that is a way to get involved locally and help directly there. Also, get involved personally. If you don't go meet with your chapter or your support group or an advocacy day, you can do that yourself too. And I am happy to help you out with that process. So if you have questions, if you want talking points, guidelines on how to do a meeting, I'm your person. Reach out to me anytime. My email is on the Tourette website and you can look and find me there. And I think one of the most important points to get across is that you don't have to be a CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, I guess I have to add Newsmax and New fanatic to be engaged. You don't have to know the ins and outs of these things. If you do, great, even more, you know, things that you can talk about. But it's important that you don't have to be obsessed with those channels in order to be someone to get engaged. You have a mission, you have a cause, and you can move forward without that. All right, so your rights. And again, understanding your rights is an important part of advocacy so that you know where they are. Now, I'm going to say up front, we are not disability rights lawyers, but we are here to just provide an overview for you of rights that exist, and that if you have issues or questions, we're going to provide links for you to reach out to. So, Americans with Disabilities Act. You've all heard of it, I'm sure. You know, 1990, it was passed by Congress and signed into law by President George Bush Sr. It was a landmark civil rights law that extended all people with disabilities the right to access public places, businesses, and participate in the same everyday activities as other citizens without disabilities. Areas that are covered include work, transportation, leisure, shopping, and public services. And I'm sure if you've applied for jobs, you've noticed that as you're doing that, they ask if you have a disability and if you need accommodations. All right, next slide. So Tourette syndrome is a disability that is covered under the American with Disabilities Act. So that's an important fact to know. However, some people with Tourette syndrome have had problems asserting their rights under the law because these legal actions hinge not just on having a diagnosis of a disability, but also on proving that the condition substantially limits one or more major life activities. And some judges have quibbled over what does constitute a major life activity. They've sometimes used a narrow definition that considers only very basic functions, such as eating, toileting, or walking. However, the Department of Justice has noted that interacting with others and working are also major life activities. And these are certainly areas where many people with TS encounter disability-related barriers. Individual judges can and do exercise discretion in how they interpret the law, however. So the outcome of an ADA case that concerns Tourette syndrome, or for that matter, any other neurological or psychiatric condition, is never absolutely certain. There's been a recent case going on to jury trial after an appeal for a hostile work environment for a person that was fired from Costco. So that is certainly something that we are continuing to monitor regarding Tourette syndrome. But as mentioned, you know, when you do file a case and go forward, it's not cut and dry and clear as to what those rights are with Tourette syndrome specifically. So that is why if you want to know more and learn more about the ADA, the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission, here's the website for you, www.eeoc.gov, and also the ADA website at www.ada.gov. And you can also look at other state and federal agencies as well. You can also contact a lawyer who has disability rights law experience if you have legal questions as well. All right, so with that, Since she is currently a student and a student with Tourette syndrome who has dealt with rights within the educational system to some degree as well, I'm going to pass it off to Olivia for these next few slides. Olivia, take it away.
All right, so now we're going to talk about your rights, but when it comes to education and in school. So the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, it's the IDEA Act, Section 1400 D1, purpose of IDEA, to ensure that all children with disabilities have available to them a free, appropriate public education that emphasizes special education and related services designed to meet their unique needs and to prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living, and to ensure that the rights of children with disabilities and parents of such children are protected. Now, this only applies through high school graduation. I also wanted to say that basically the difference between a IEP and a 504 plan is that an IEP provides special education classes, and a 504 just offers accommodations for students who don't necessarily need special education. All right, we can go to the next slide, sorry. All right, now what about college or grad school? So Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 still protects students from discrimination when they get to college. However, they won't get a 504 plan exactly like they had in high school. In other words, a student's 504 plan doesn't travel with them to college, but students can still receive accommodations in college. Colleges have to provide accommodations under Section 504, though you aren't likely to hear many colleges use the phrase 504 plan. So now the disability service model at college is very different from the one high schoolers and their parents are used to. Colleges tend to offer different types of supports, and that's why it's super important to learn as much as you can about disability services in college. And every college has a student disability office. So I recommend you to go talk to them as soon as possible about getting accommodations in college. For example, the process of requesting and receiving accommodations in college is not the same as in high school. Colleges may also vary in their requirements for documentation. So you might need your diagnosis letter or even your previous 504 plan from high school. Another big difference between high school and college is that your child has to seek out the support that the colleges offer. I know that my first year in college, I had no idea that my school had a disability office, and then my second year I found out, and I went and talked to them, and it just completely changed the game for me. So The Tourette Association is supporting the RISE Act to create national centers to help students navigate their educational needs for college, for college, and to give guidelines to the materials accepted to determine accommodations for students. I'll throw it back to Diana.
Thank you, Olivia. That was great, and appreciate your sharing your perspectives and your experiences with that as well. All right, on to the next slide. There's light at the end of the tunnel, everyone. All right, so if you have legal rights and questions, what should you do? First of all, you should always contact a lawyer who works in disability-related law if you think you need to find out your rights or exercise them in a way that is important to you, or if you're not getting answers where you need them. As mentioned before, you can look up the laws. ADA as well as the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission are two places you can look to get more information there. There's also state and federal government agencies that can help too. And I mentioned before the National Disabilities Rights Network. It's a group that I work with in Washington a fair bit. They're the nonprofit membership organization for the federally mandated P&A systems and client assistance programs. So as I mentioned previously, there's a P&A or a CAP agency in every state and US territory, as well as the Native American population in the Four Corners region of the US. So this network is a great network. They provide legally based advocacy services, whether it's employment, whether it's education. They are fully engaged and understand those rights. And one of the areas I work with that group most on is education aspects regarding individuals with disabilities. They're a wealth of knowledge. So if you have any questions or want to look up those networks or see what is available in your state, go to www.ndrn.org. And if they're not being responsive, reach out to me. I'm happy to put you in touch with the folks that I work with there at any point. All right, with that, I think that is a quick overview and an overview on advocacy, the different types of advocacy, how you can get more involved in advocacy, how that links to your rights, what your rights are, and how you can get questions and answers on those rights if you have any. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Amethyst, who's going to manage the Q&A portion of our program.
All right, thank you so much, ladies. So right now we have two questions. I know I did not mention in the beginning, but if you do have questions, please feel free to submit them to the chat box and we can get to them during this during the webinar. Otherwise, I will email you directly after. And you can email me at support@tourette.org. So the first question comes from Cameron J. How can I get my accommodations at my college? And I don't know, I'm going to unmute both of you for that one.
Right. Well, I think Olivia gave a great example of how her life changed a little bit by finding her office. Olivia, you want to go over that a little more again and just provide details on how you found it at your school and then how you engaged at the beginning?
Yes, absolutely. So like I said, every college is required to have a disability disability service center or office for students with disabilities. And some accommodations that can be made include extended testing times, extended times on tests in a quiet room away from everyone else. And also one of the biggest accommodations that I have found that helps me is you can actually they can actually lower the hours required per semester to be considered a full-time student. Now, this may take longer to graduate, but it's actually more common for students to take 6 years to graduate rather than just 4 years. So, don't be, don't compare yourself to others' college experiences and how short or long they take to finish college.
Great advice, Olivia. Amethyst, is there another question?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was speaking and my mic was muted. The next
Oh.
question comes from Jennifer I. She would like to know, how did she find the address to write a letter to her local congressman?
Excellent question. All right, so there's a few ways you can do that. If you go to the website www.house.gov, you can, in the top right corner, type in your zip code, and it will list for you, it'll pop up who your member of Congress is if you don't already know. Sometimes you have to add in your street address because there's lines that can be close in a district, so it may literally come down to what street you live on, who your member of Congress is. But either way, you get your address entered and it will tell you who your representative is. If you know who they are, there's a listing by state and also by alphabet for you to find. If you want to make it even easier and you want to use our system where we basically provide text for you and just hit click, go to Tourette.org to the public policy section and then go to take action. There's the take action for National Advocacy Day where you can register, but there's also take action where you can send a take action letter. That would make it a little bit easier for you. On their website, well, they will have their addresses. So once you follow a link to their website, they have usually, most of them have an area that says contact. So how to contact them. They have an address. If you do mail it by regular mail, it does take a while. Well, A, because it's DC and we're bureaucratic, but B, ever since anthrax, the mail takes a little while because they do some special things to it before it goes into Congress and they get it. But they also provide emails and even contact forms that you can fill out on the website as well. Each office is slightly different. You can also use social media as well. So if you have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, I don't think the members have Snapchat, or I don't, so I don't know if they do. But most of them have one or all of those avenues of way to communicate to them as well. And that certainly is a vehicle that we'll be using on National Advocacy Day because we're asking folks to post hashtag Rally for Tourette. So keep an eye out for those posts on March 3rd as well. But there's all kinds of avenues that you can do. You can, send a letter to their offices in their district, or you can send one to the House of Representatives, and that address is just the same. It's to a member of Congress, U.S. House of Representatives, Washington, D.C., the same address. But you'll see it on the website, and that will help you narrow it in.
Okay, thank you. The next question comes from Alicia S. Who do I contact about rising medical costs in my state? In reference to medications, like the over.
To medications, got it. No,
Yeah.
I'm your girl. It's important to understand what's happening in different states and areas, and TAA is a part of several coalitions, a lot of coalitions actually, where we work on that. We have a few factors for our prescriptions that make it interesting. One of the top policy priorities, just so you know, that we'll be working on for National Advocacy Day is, trying to get support for legislation called the Safe Step Act. And that is legislation where, I don't know if those of you on the phone who take medication have had this experience, but you go to the pharmacy and you're trying to refill a prescription or you're trying to fill a new prescription, and they tell you that your insurance does not want to cover that drug and instead wants to cover a completely different drug that is not what your doctor provided. It's not even a generic form of what you're to take. It's a completely different active ingredient. This is becoming more and more common. It's called utilization management by the prescription benefit managers, PBMs, which are basically your drug insurance companies. So the Express Scripts or the Optum Rx's of the world. They use it as a way to change and minimize costs on their end, not necessarily on your pocket, but on their pocket. So we are working with others to try and change that, because It is hard when an insurance company is trying to make a decision on the medication you're taking when you and your doctor made a very careful decision. And Tourette is one of those conditions where it's complicated because of the co-occurring conditions. So depending on the medications and what we've seen in our impact surveys is it usually takes several types of medication before you find the one that tends to work with you. If you got it on the first try, you're lucky and should be grateful. But keep trying different ones, and that different medications can interact with the co-occurring conditions as well. So an insurance company randomly choosing another drug based on cost instead of based on the impact on that individual can be an issue. And so this legislation, the Safe Step Act, would actually work to improve the appeals process and work to minimize the ability of the insurance companies to do that. Because, when they're changing the drug to make it cheaper, like I said, they're not making it cheaper for you, they're making it cheaper on their end. It may be a higher cost drug for you when you fill it on your end of the bargain. So that is one of the many things we do, but we're also engaged in, legislation across the board through our National Health Council membership and other ways too, as they assess and look at different pieces of legislation, for drug pricing across the board in different aspects. So we are engaged across the board, but it is always good for me to have examples. So please feel free to reach out and email me and let me know what's going on. And to have that example is always helpful for me to go to Capitol Hill and advocate on your behalf so that I can give very specific answers on certain geographies and what our patients are facing.
Okay, thank you, Diana. And the last question comes from Mark Y. How do I support the TAA Advocacy Day event?
Excellent. Well, the best way, Mark, to support it is to sign up. It's still open. So we are, a little less than 2 weeks away. So if you go to Tourette.org and Google National Advocacy Day, it's on the rolling window that comes across, but you can also put right into Google Tourette National Advocacy Day and it'll pop right up March 3rd. Click on that. You can read about it and you'll see register over to the side. And not only can you register, but ask your family and friends to register to advocate on your behalf and to join as well. The more, especially if they're not in the same congressional district you are, if they're across the country, even better. The more voices that we have on that day, the more noise we make. Because, I know I said earlier you don't have to be a CNN or Fox News fanatic, but if any of you have watched CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, or just even the evening news on one of the major networks every night, right now, Washington's a very noisy place, meaning there is a lot going on here right now. And it's easy in an environment like that for the big issues of the day to dominate the minds and thoughts of people up on Capitol Hill and the staff that are working for these Republicans and senators. So that's why a day like National Advocacy Day is so important, because what it says to each one of them that we meet with and talk to is, this is important to us. We elect you and we need you to represent us and make sure that our concerns and priorities are being taken care of, because that's how they each get in the seat that they're in. You vote them in, or others in the, maybe you didn't vote for them, maybe others in your district did, but that's how they get elected and that's what they care about. So your voice there is extremely important. And for those of you who are already registered for Advocacy Day, we will be sending an email out your way about take action letters, and we're going to ask you before Advocacy Day to send that link out to everyone in your network, your family, your friends, and ask them to all do these take action letters that I mentioned earlier. You enter your name and address, you can personalize it a little bit. You don't have to if you don't want to. You hit send, and then emails automatically go to the congressmen and senators of all those folks in your networks. So there's 2 different avenues on that day to really, really amplify our voice and therefore have incredible results that benefit everyone.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And thank you, ladies, tonight for the information. And thank you to all of our listeners for taking time out of their day to tune in. And if you do think of any other questions, please feel free to email me at support@tourette.org. That's SUPPORT @tourette.org. And everyone, have a good night and please stay safe.